Hello everybody and welcome back to another My Porch Prints tutorials. This is Kyra and today we are going to be continuing on with our Victorian Grunge Junk Journal series. Now I do have a flip through as well as a tutorial for how to make the faux leather cover for this journal already out. So if you haven't seen those, make sure to watch those first. I do have links down in the description box for you if you are interested. But for today's video I'm going to be showing you how to create like the decorations for the cover as well as the signatures that are going inside. So let's go ahead and jump right into that today. So to get started, I'm starting with the pages that come with the His Lordship's Manor junk journal kit that we have in our Etsy shop. And I've gone ahead and printed everything out. On the journal pages, I printed them front and back. So on the back of them, I printed some lined and blank pages to make sure I had plenty of writing space in this journal. And then I also printed out these sort of like pretty decorative papers that come with the kit, and I printed those out front and back as well. Just ran them through the printer again after printing them out the first time. And our printer does not print borderless, so I'm going to be cutting the edges off of mine. For some of them, I'm going to be using this decal edge cutter, which if you've watched our videos before, you know I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with this. It's small enough that you do have to fold your pages to cut the tops and bottoms off, but it does work in a pinch, though you do have to go page by page because it's not a very strong blade. So for mine, I am going to be cutting them at a little bit of an angle because I really wanted to focus on layers in this journal, really get like that messy, grungy, layered effect. So I'm going to be not only cutting them at angles, but also tearing some of the pages by hand. And this is going to make sure that there's lots of uneven edges so you can really get that like layered, grungy effect to the pages. And I'm only doing this to about half of the pages, with the rest being cut with my straight edge cutter, and we do have a link for these in our Amazon shop link down below, so you can check that out if you are interested. Honestly, the paper cutter has saved me so much time. I would recommend it for sure for anybody without a printer that doesn't, you know, print to the edge. Alright, next I'm going to go in with some distress ink. This is the Tim Holtz distress ink in the color Vintage Photo, and I'm going to just go over the edges of my papers and make them look a little bit more grunged, a little more distressed. And I also thought I would like a little bit of contrast, so I'm going to be using the coffee dyed papers and journal pages from our shop. And you can see that's just going to add a little bit of extra warmth to my selection of pages here and give me a lot of papers, so I've got plenty to go in my journal. Now you can of course use any papers you want. You don't have to use what I'm using. This is just kind of what I chose for this journal. And I'm going to be dividing up all of my papers into 5 signatures today. So I'm just going to kind of mix and match them, trying to make sure I have a good selection in each of my piles. So, you know, I don't want one of them to be all straight cut edged journal pages. I want to have like a good mix of papers. And I'm also going through and making sure, you know, things are right way, like right side up, not upside down. If you've ever sewn a signature into your journal upside down before, you know that it's a bit of a pain. So I like to go through and just double check that before I, you know, actually sew them in. And I like to kind of give mine a gentle fold and like just hold them all together and kind of get a look at the selection and make sure that I like the colors and the order, make sure there's nothing else I might want to swap or add. But I'm liking the way that this looks, so I think we'll go ahead and move on here. So taking all of my signatures and setting them to the side here, we're also going to be adding some layers to our signatures. So I'm going to be doing a layered envelope sort of mix in with my signatures here. So I've got a selection of some envelopes and cards that we got off of Amazon. I believe these should be linked down below as well. Or you could hit up like a office supply store and pick up some envelopes there, or some CD cases. I have these coffee dyed CD cases, which we do have a tutorial for. If you are interested, I will link that down below if that's something you want to try to make. And then a couple of like these little like treat bags that I just kind of found in our drawer. So I'm going to just be using some of those. And then I also wanted to make a couple of like layered scraps, so I'm going to go into my scrap drawer here and just sort of look through various scraps from old projects and kits that we have and try to find anything that kind of will go with this kit. And I found a couple of pieces that I think I'm going to use for decorating, so any pages that have like nothing printed on the back and are just white on the back. I'm going to save those pieces for decorating in the next video, but if I can find pieces that are printed front and back, I'm going to fold these into my signatures to create some layers. So just kind of going through here and finding what I like. Again, you can use anything you have on hand. And you don't have to just be limited to printed papers. You could use newspaper, or like I have a piece of vellum here, or craft paper or notebook paper. Anything that you have on hand is fine. You want a variety of shapes and sizes. If you have scraps from old projects or, you know, old books, anything like that will do. And I'm going to go ahead and set the scraps aside that I'll be using for decorating. We won't need that until the next video here. But I'm going to take these scraps that have the two sides, and we're going to be using these in our signatures. So let's go ahead and start assembling some of those. We're going to begin with our envelopes here, and you're just going to be stacking them over one another just by folding the flaps just like together like this, kind of matching up the crease. And I like to go from largest on the inside to smallest on the outside, so you get this nice like layered effect where you can see all of the envelopes at once, just like this. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of do that with all of my envelopes, just finding ones that I like the look of together and sort of folding them over one another like this. And you can fold them in ways that allow them to flip in different directions. That can be kind of fun. You can sort of experiment and play with it a little bit. You can fold them, you know, horizontally or vertically, like these snack bags. I'm going to just go ahead and paper clip them onto this card here from the top. And that way when you open up the card, you have these little bags that you can like tuck some ephemera into, and that's sort of just like another extra fun layered effect here. So go ahead and get creative and just experiment with what you have on hand. And I'm going to go ahead and make 5 of those since I have 5 signatures. And to keep everything together, I've got some clips I'm going to be using, just some bulldog clips. I have like a clothespin here. But if you don't have clips, you could also use things like bobby pins, like anything at all, to just make sure that you don't get these, you know, mixed up and shuffled around, since we're going to have to lay them to the side for a little bit here while we decorate our cover. And then next we are going to move on to the paper, and it's the same process here. So I've got all these like paper scraps, and I'm going to be again creating like 5 different piles. And some of these pieces are a little bit large. I do want them to be small enough to kind of layer in my pages. I don't want them too big. So I'm going to go ahead and tear any pieces that are like full pages here. And once I've got kind of a base for my 5 piles, I'm just going to start dividing up my scraps into them, just whichever ones I like and how they look, how they layer over one another. Don't have to think too hard about this process. You can always change it up later. I'm just trying to kind of get an idea here. And it's okay to kind of tear your papers and kind of get some interesting shapes. It just adds a little bit to the layering and makes things a little more fun. All right, so now we have kind of the base of our signatures here all laid out, as well as our scraps and our envelopes that we're going to be using to make our signatures. So now that we have all of those things, we can go ahead and set these aside for now. We'll come back to this a little bit later in the video, but now we have our, you know, base prepared. Alright, so let's move on here to our cover. Now again, if you haven't seen my last video where I showed you how to make a faux leather cover, make sure that you check that out before coming to this one. Or you can cover your cover however you like. It doesn't have to be the faux leather. This is just kind of what I did for my grunge journal. And I'm grunging it up a little bit more by taking a Kleenex, just a dry Kleenex, and some black acrylic paint that I just sort of lightly dipped it in. And I'm just kind of smudging that paint along the edge of my journal, as well as like the crease along the spine. And this is just to grunge it up a little bit further, age it a little bit. You don't have to do this. This was just something I wanted to try and just give it a little bit more of a, you know, lived in look. And then for decorating the spine, I started off with some book plates that I wanted to use as hardware, but unfortunately they weren't lying properly, so I thought I'll just go ahead and remove them. Yeah, that didn't really work out. So I decided I'm gonna have to cover this up, so I'm just gonna roll with it. And I have some of these scrap pieces from the video where I made the leather cover, and I decided I would just go ahead and tear those samples up and glue them down in like a collage style along the spine. Now you don't have to use like a faux leather scrap if you don't want to. You could use, you know, newspaper or book pages or any scraps you have on hand. I think would look really neat. I do like the scrap collage sort of look on the spine. I think it's kind of unique and fun. So just go ahead and find some random pieces, tear them up, and glue them down. You can add a little paint to distress them if you want, and just sort of have fun with this. It doesn't have to be perfect, just until you're happy with it. But however you choose to decorate your spine, the next process is going to be adding some holes to the spine for our signatures. So I actually already added mine previously when I thought I was going to be using the hardware, but let me kind of go back here and show you what I did for this. So we have a hidden spine template is what it's called in our shop, and it's also available in our Facebook group as a freebie if you want. And I just printed it off, grabbed the one that matched my spine. I'm doing a 2-inch spine, so I grabbed the 2-inch template, and I'm just folding it along the lines that come with the template here, and I'm going to be rounding mine since my spine is round. You could of course do this while your spine is still flat if you want, and that might make things a little bit simpler. It's really up to you. And then we're going to align the template with our spine. Try to make sure that you get this as straight as possible. You want the lines on the template to match up with the crease of our spine. And then I'm clipping it in place to make sure it doesn't move. And I'm using this tool called an awl, which comes with our bookbinding kit that we have linked down in the description box if you are interested. But you could use a needle or any sharp object. And we're just going to punch out these holes here that are in the template. So go all the way through the spine, all the way through the cover to the other side, just like this. And we're going to do that for all of these little holes. Alright, and once you have all of those holes punched, you can remove your template and continue decorating. So I have grabbed a couple of these little woven ribbon. I'm not really sure what this material is. I think we might have a link for it. I will try to add it down below if we do, but any ribbon will work. I'm just using this to kind of clean up the edges of my spine here, so I'm just going to glue it down. And I did make them longer than my actual cover so that I could just fold the edges over onto the inside, and that's going to give me a really clean edge here. So just like this. And you can ignore those scraps I had on the inside. I was just reinforcing some areas on the spine where I poked holes for adding hardware earlier, which you won't need to do, so you don't need to worry about it. But the ribbon added to the spine will actually add a little bit of stability to your spine. So if you did what I did, and I mentioned this in the video where I made the faux leather, my covers were a little bit far apart from my spine. So again, I just wanted to add a little bit of stability, and adding the strips of ribbon can help do that. But now that the spine is done, we're continuing on with decorating our cover. So I'm just adding some of these hardware corners here, using some brads to secure them in place. And we bought these on Amazon. Again, links will be down below if you are interested. But we're doing this first since the brads are going on the inside. I didn't want to see them, so we're going to do all this before we add our inside covers. And speaking of brads, I'm going to be using them to secure a book plate to the cover. And I wanted to add some layered decorative chains to the cover, and so I'm gonna need pieces that are one that's shorter and one that's longer. So I picked one that was about 6.5 inches, and then the next one is 5 inches. And these chains I just got from a craft store. They have them sold just in the ribbon section, but you could use an old necklace or something like that. Just whatever you have on hand works fine. And I'm going to go ahead and lay out my longest chain and my book plate just to kind of get an idea of where I want my book plate to sit. And once I'm happy with it, I'm going to mark it with a Sharpie inside the little holes on either side of the book plate, and then punch through my cover with that awl that I mentioned earlier. And then I'm going to grab some of these little bulb pins here. Again, you can get these at craft shops or buy them online. And you're going to need 2 of them for what we're doing here, which is we're going to add our chain to the bulb pin. You'll want to start with the longest chain. That's important here. So make sure you just grab the last link and add it onto the bulb pin, and then go in with the shorter chain and do the same thing. So you want to start with the longest, then the shortest if you want them to lay properly. So just make sure that you do that. And then once you are done with one side, we're going to do the same thing to the other side. So grab your second bulb pin, and again, start with the longest chain and that link, go ahead and add it onto the bulb pin, and then grab the shortest chain and add that on, and then close your bulb pin up, and you will get kind of this little chain dangle here. And then we're going to secure it to our book plate using a small brad here. I don't know if this would work with a larger brad. It might, but you'll just have to kind of experiment. We are using the smaller ones today for this. And I'm just going to go ahead and pop it through the holes that we punched and then flatten the prongs of the brad on the back side of the journal like this. And that's going to hold that bulb pin in place. Now you could pop it off probably with a little bit of effort, which might be nice if somebody doesn't like the chain and wants to remove it for some reason. But I found that they were really secure, so you don't have to worry about them falling off. This holds really, really well. So just do the same thing to the other side, and there you go. You've got this cute little decorative chain on the front cover of your journal. All right, if you want to, you could also pop a little journal word from the kit inside of your book plate. I'm going to go ahead and do that here. I don't even need glue. I'm just going to kind of press it in here and it'll just kind of slide in just like that. All right, and that is going to pretty much finish the decorating for our cover. The only other thing is I did want to add a closure for my journal. Now I don't want to add this main part yet because I don't know how thick my journal is going to be, so I'm going to do that later. However, something to make note of is this clasp that I ended up using is actually not a hinge clasp. It doesn't actually fold around the journal, so the clasp just sticks out awkwardly like this. This is the wrong kind of clasp. There are the right kinds, and I will have them linked down below. They actually are meant for books. This is meant for like a wood box. It's not, this is the wrong kind of clasp to use. But I had already committed and put it into my journal, so for me I ended up taking a pair of pliers and bending it to kind of make it work. It's not the best solution, but you know, you make do with what you have. So, you know, if this is all you have on hand, you can go ahead and give this a shot. It does take some muscle because this is thick metal here, but I did end up kind of getting it to work and I was okay with how it looked in the end. But to avoid that problem in the future, I would recommend using the proper hinges. So make sure you go down in the description box, check out that link, and make sure that you buy the right kind of hinge for this. It'll save you a lot of trouble. All right, as for the inside of the journal, now that we are done with the outside, I'm going to be grabbing a decorative paper. This one is from the men's vintage journal kit. And again, links for all of these kits down below. And I just went ahead and added some distress ink to the edges of this piece of paper and glued it in. And then I printed out a second one and did the same process. And I'm going to cut this one a little bit shorter and save that scrap to add to my decorating papers for later, since I don't want to waste it. I just needed enough to cover up the other side of my journal. And you don't have to worry about it being a seamless, you know, flow between the pattern because it's going to be covered up by signatures anyway. So just go ahead and glue them in just enough to kind of cover the inside like this. And there you go. Now that base is done. So I'm just going to take my awl and kind of re-poke those holes that we made previously in the spine. And now we can get into finishing our signatures. So for that, I'm taking my scraps and I'm just going to be folding them around my pages as well as with my envelopes. Same thing. We're just going to kind of find a place in your signature. It can be at the front or the back or the middle, wherever you want it to go. And we're just going to kind of wrap our envelopes around the crease of our pages in our signature. So just fold your signatures in half like this. And you can add your scraps, you know, top, bottom, middle of a page, doesn't matter. You could even layer them up kind of like in a sort of staircase stack here from like the top corner down like this. That's kind of a pretty layered effect. You can also take scraps and glue them into your pages now if that's something you want to try. So like I'm gluing that extra piece from when we decorated the inside just around the edge to give a little bit more of a layered look to my decorating. You can use pieces that are horizontal or vertical, however you want to do things. Just kind of have fun with it and find how you like the look of things until you get a layered effect that is satisfying and grungy and junky and makes you happy. All right, so now I have all of my final signatures. I've got all 5 of my kind of, layered papers and envelopes assembled. And now we can add them to our book. So again, taking that hidden spine template, it does come with this little piece here that we're going to be using to help sew our signatures in. Now, originally I was planning to use brads and the brad binding method that you may have seen me use on other journals or on our channel before. However, the signatures were just too thick and the brads were not holding properly. I've actually never had that before, so this is the first time I've run into that issue. So I decided to go back and do a pamphlet stitch, which is going to hold things in a little bit better. So I've already gone ahead and added the other signatures in ahead of time, so we're going to just show you kind of what to do with the very last one here. So take your signature and you're going to want to open it up to the very center of the signature. And we're going to use this little template here that came with that hidden spine template printable. And we're going to add it right into the center of the crease and just clip it down using a couple of clips to make sure things aren't moving. And you might have a couple of pieces like these layered pieces that you need to clip down so that they're not moving either. So just keep that in mind. You want everything to kind of be held in place so that they don't shuffle around. That'll make sewing a lot easier in the future. So next, taking our sharp tool here, again, we're just going to poke the holes through our signature and just kind of follow that template. And then when you're done, you're going to want to remove the template piece. You don't want to accidentally sew it into your journal and you'll need it for your other signatures. So make sure to take that out. But we're going to keep things clipped together. And now grabbing some string for sewing, I'm taking some waxed thread that came with that bookbinding kit that I mentioned earlier. It's got all the little pieces that you'll need for binding a journal. And when I'm measuring how much string I need for a journal, I usually like to go a little overboard. So I tend to go 1, 2, 3.5 the length of my journal when measuring. That's kind of just how I figure out how much string I need. And then I'm also taking a thick needle from the bookbinding kit, and we're just going to thread the needle with the waxed string, and you're just going to want to pull it until you've got like one slightly shorter tail. That's just a couple of inches here, and the rest is a much longer tail, okay? And when sewing our signature in, again, make sure everything is right side up so that you don't have to redo your sewing later. And we're going to start by going through the center of our signature in the very center hole, just like this. Go ahead and poke it all the way through. Make sure you get it through all of your layers here. And then you're going to want to go ahead and poke it through the center hole in your, signature, like the series of holes for your signature on the journal spine. So I'm going to go ahead and find that hole right here and poke the needle through like this, going out through the back of the journal spine. And of course, I'm doing the very last set of signatures here, but if you're starting with the first set of signatures, you'll want to start, towards the front cover of your journal. And then if you're having trouble pulling it through, you can use a pair of pliers to make it a little bit easier. Sometimes if you have really thick signatures, it can be a little bit tough, so that can help you with that. And we're going to want to pull it through until we're leaving a little bit of a tail behind. And I like to clip mine down so that I don't accidentally pull it out. If you pull it out, you'll have to start over. So this just kind of makes sure that you don't do that. All right, just clipping it down like that. And now we're going to continue with sewing, and I'm going to go through this top hole here. So starting on the outside of our spine, just going to find that hole and pierce through it with the needle, and then going to find the top hole in our signature and go through that. Right, just like this, pull it through. Take your time, don't poke yourself here. And then we're going to go all the way down to the bottom hole at the bottom of our signature. Same process here, going through that, and then going through the bottom hole in our spine. And now we're going to go back through that center hole again. Right? Just like this. Again, using some pliers if you need to. And now we can remove the needle. And we can remove our clips, and what we're going to do is make sure that these two loose strings are on either side of our center string. We want them to be underneath it. We want the center string on top. And we're just going to give them a good tight tug here. Make sure that everything is secure. pull it as tight as you can, and then tie a couple of knots. Just like this. And you're gonna have these tails that you can cut off if you want, or tie into a bow, or you can just let them kind of hang depending on the style of journal. You might add beads to them or something like that. However you want to do it. I'm just gonna trim mine a little bit shorter and leave them as is. And then I like to go through and smooth out the creases of each of my pages, and that just makes sure that the pages flip a little bit easier. And there you go. Now you've got all of your signatures sewn into your journal. Now, I decided to add some brads just for decoration to my journal. So we're kind of doing like a faux brad here. So I'm just going to find the space in between my signatures, just like this. Clip the pages out of the way to make things a little bit easier. And then grabbing my brad, I want to make sure that they're going vertically, not horizontally when I flatten the prongs. Otherwise, obviously your journal can't close. So just make sure that you do that when you're poking it in. And then you want to make sure that you poke right in between your signatures like this, and then flatten those prongs again vertically. And if you're having trouble reaching them with like a really thick signature journal, you can use like some pliers or tweezers to help you flatten those prongs. And there you go. Just go ahead and do the same thing for all of your brads. And now you've got all of your signatures cemented into your journal with kind of a pretty decorative spine here. Got the sewing. If you don't want to see the sewing, you could use the hidden spine template the way that it was originally intended, and that will help you hide all of those like strings on the inside of your journal, and then you could just add brads decoratively if you wanted to. It's kind of up to you. Something to keep in mind is when you are poking your holes though, if you are adding brads, you want to try to get them as even as possible. If you get off just a little bit, it's kind of noticeable. I am using pliers to kind of help straighten some of them out. Since they're just decorative, I can do that. Just something to keep in mind. But all right, there we go. Now we've got our signatures, we've got our cover decorated. Everything's pretty much ready to go. You can see there's plenty of space. If you wanted to add, you know, more writing papers and just leave the journal as is, you could do that and just make it kind of a grungy writing journal. However, I'm gonna go ahead and do some decorating in my journal. So that's gonna be the next video. So make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on that. And I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye.